Hello brother and sister truth seekers. I wanted to do a quick video, just kind of, I guess I believe you may be at different places in your walk and your pursuit of truth, but you know, I've come to the place where when I read the Bible, you know, I believe that the Savior said not one jot or tittle would pass from the law until heaven and earth passed, and that's an event spoken of in Revelation that has not happened yet. And so, you know, I hold on to the instructions of the Almighty, and in the New Testament it says sin is the transgression of the law, and that word law, I believe, is just, in the Hebrew it's Torah, or instructions. And so, you know, Paul says we would not even know what sin was unless the law defined it for us. So I believe the Creator has standards of righteousness and holiness, what is right, what is wrong, what is clean, what is unclean. And you know, I just am trying to seek Him with all my heart and with all my mind and with all my soul and heart and all that good stuff. And so one of the things that is important is his holy times, his Sabbaths, and his holy days, which the world has. You know, there are these things nowadays called holidays, which have their origin in holy days, but it's not. The holidays are not the holy days of the Creator. So I'm here to talk about the holy days of the Creator today. And I believe, as I said, in obeying the instructions of the Almighty, and one of these instructions is in Leviticus 23:4. It says, "Ye shall proclaim in their seasons." So that is why I do videos like this, or send out emails letting my friends and family know, people I know, when these holy times are. And this is just my current understanding. We're all learning. I don't claim to be perfect, so I'm just sharing my current understanding. This is where I'm currently at. I've been very passionate about trying to find truth on this topic, but that's not to say I have not found it yet. But you know, just one more food for thought. Over in Daniel 7:25, it says the lawless one, the Antichrist, would think to change times and laws. And so these are the end days, and it's just very important for us to understand his times. Like, I don't think we even have a shot at understanding prophecy if we don't understand his times, and I think it'll prepare us for understanding exactly how things are gonna shake down here at the end of time. But anyway, so this is just my current understanding, and so right now I'm going to share with you kind of a summary of my current understanding, the timing of the holy days. So this is kind of like a normal calendar. The rows are weeks. Every individual cell is a day. And I've included, so this is the first day of the week would be Sunday, second day Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I've included the Gregorian date as a reference on Wednesdays, and then I've just continued it over here, because my brain, I like to be able to see everything on one page to kind of see the symmetry and the patterns of things. So those are the Gregorian dates there for a reference. And in a nutshell, well, let me continue explaining a little bit about this. So I've tried to color code this so you can come over here and kind of reference what's going on in these cells. So for example, we are coming up on the fall holy days, and I'll talk about how we determine that in a minute. But these colors here tell you, well, you can count when these are. From the Gregorian date, just so you understand what these other numbers are. These are seasonal numbers that I'm counting, days in a season. So these green cells are, to the best of my current understanding, are the days which divide the seasons of the year. I've been doing some videos on my channel lately about how it seems modern science is claiming the seasons aren't equal, and I was just kind of shocked to hear that, and I won't go into depth about that now, but I do believe that the short answer is they are just simply misunderstanding how a season should be defined. They're referencing off of stars and moving objects, and I think the scriptures, well, I do believe the book of Enoch has some value for us, and one thing the book of Enoch talks about, I mean, I could be wrong, but the book of Enoch could be an error too. I'm open to that, but the book of Enoch does say the seasons are equal, and you know, that's kind of what I thought growing up my entire life, I guess, and so I was really shocked to hear modern science saying the seasons were not equal. So anyway, this is based off of the assumption that the seasons are equal, and we'll talk about that more in a little bit. But so these days, these other numbers you see me counting are the days of the seasons, and around the holy times I've included them. Like, I pretty much just count by sevens just to kind of keep this looking not so congested, and that'll bring me to the next season, 91, and then you count. But near the head of spring and the head of fall, I've included the count of the days through the week, because those counts are important for us to know the timing of the Creator's set times. And so on another note, one thing I've been pondering lately is if this verse is saying more than just like to proclaim in their seasons. Like, I've always taken that to say, you know, we should be letting our light shine, and we should be telling our brothers and sisters about it to the best of our understandings. But now, one thing that jumped out at me recently is I'm wondering if that's actually saying something. I wonder what this word proclaim is. Like, I wonder if there's a deeper meaning to that word, like it maybe like make sure you are determining them or measuring them based off of that season, or make sure it's in the correct season. I'm not sure, but that was just a thought I had, because you know, people call these upcoming holy days the fall holy days. So I mean, we've got to understand the division of the seasons, and if the holy day is not in fall, because the Day of Trumpets is the first day of fall. And so if we aren't getting these seasonal days right, we might have a Day of Trumpets that is not in the correct season. So all of a sudden this verse seems to have more weight because it's proclaimed in their season. So what if it's not the right season? But anyway, so that's what these other numbers are, just as kind of a reference so you can count. But they're counting based off of the seasons. So now I'll just briefly want to talk about how I have come to this understanding and the timing of things. You know, there are a lot of traditions out there, and what sparked my desire, I mean, I want to know these holy times because I do believe there's special times of holy fellowship with our brothers and sisters and with our Creator, and it's like a date with the Creator that I don't want to miss. It's a very special time for Him. And so, you know, that's probably the most important part of it. But something, a few years ago, I think it was like back in 2015, there was just so many doomsday prophets and out there in the news, and they were all making all these predictions, and there was a lot of focus around the holy days, and like, oh, these are prophetic days, and things are going to happen on these prophetic days, and so many people made so many predictions, and then nothing happened. And it was around that time that I started to realize there were so many different understandings of the Creator's calendar. And I began to realize, you know, no wonder none of these prophecies are coming true. There are like hundreds of different interpretations. There are almost as many different interpretations of the Creator's calendar as there are denominations in modern Christianity. And so I kind of took a step back from prophecy and realized I need to figure out how the calendar and the Creator's times work before I even have a shot at understanding prophecy. And again, I would like to remind you of this verse that says He would think to change times and laws. And so I think it's a very important thing that we get familiar with. But so there are a lot of traditions out there. There are a lot of different versions of the calendar, and essentially what I've kind of come to is I really don't put much of any stock into tradition, and I'm trying to find something that is written. I very heavily rely on Genesis 1:14, where he says he gave us the luminaries for signs, for seasons, for days, and for years. Like, that's kind of my foundation. But in addition to that, I really wanted, I came across Enoch, and I realized the Book of Enoch seemed to be the oldest book that didn't really lay out the Creator's calendar, but it talked about how the heavenly luminaries work and how they move, their cycles, their orbits, their positions, and that's what Genesis 1:14 is saying. Genesis 1:14 is saying, let these lights in the heaven be for times, for signs, for seasons, for days, and for years. And so I began to look believing very strongly that to understand the movements of the heavenly luminaries will answer the question of how time begins. And so Book of Enoch was an interesting, and is an interesting book. I think we have some translational verification work that needs to be done, but Enoch kind of gives you a ballpark idea of what's going on, but ultimately we must confirm via observation. We must be actually measuring the sun, the moon, and the stars to see if these things are so, and to see how they work, and they will answer questions about time. And so, that's what I've been doing. And, ultimately, I think the luminaries are speaking louder than any ancient text, whether it's the Bible or Enoch. Like, I mean, of course, not, don't. The reason I say it that way is because in the Bible, yes, we have Genesis 1:14, great, but that doesn't tell us anything about the luminaries. It doesn't tell us what a year cycle is. It doesn't tell us the stars are faster than the sun, the moon is slower than the sun. It doesn't tell us that there's interesting portal movements that happen in the north-south direction, and this is the reason we have seasons. It doesn't tell us things like this. So the scriptures tell us the timepieces are the luminaries, and then later in Leviticus 23 it tells us when the times are, but it doesn't, the scriptures don't tell us, don't appear to tell us and describe exactly how the clock works. That's where Enoch comes in. It seems Enoch describes how the clock works, but we don't have to just take Enoch's word for it. We can get out there and we can make observations and we can see. And we can test Enoch and see. I mean, if Enoch's not true, great. If it is true, great. But ultimately, we are going to learn what the luminaries are doing, and that's going to help us understand what the Creator's times are. And so far as I've seen, I think there's great potential for what Enoch says to be true, and to have a lot of potential to help us understand the Creator's times, but that's not, that's not where the buck stops. Like, we need to actually get out there and measure and confirm. And so, lots of traditions out there, but I'm throwing aside all that written stuff, and now have had a heavy focus on trying to understand what the sun, moon, and stars are actually doing. And so that's what you see before you. And the foundation of my current understanding of the Creator's calendar is the seasons play a huge role. Like, it's a fundamental thing that helps us to know what a year cycle is. Like, we wouldn't know what a year is were it not for the 4 seasons. Like, we don't know what a year is because of the moon or the stars necessarily, though they can be second witnesses, but primarily we know what a year is because of the position of the sun in the heavens. The sun is traveling east to west over the course of a day, but in addition, over the course of a year, the sun slowly appears to move in the sky north and south as well. And that's why sometimes of the year when the sun is down here, the south is having summer and we're having winter, and then when the sun is up here, we're having summer and they're having winter. So yes, the sun moves east to west over the course of the day, but it moves north and south as well. And so the That movement is the subtle movement that actually defines the year cycle. And it does seem, in order for this full north-south movement to occur, it seems to be taking 365.25 days. That doesn't necessarily mean that what Enoch says about 364 is wrong. Like I said, I think there's translational verification to be done, because at one point he says 364 stations, and he might be talking about this movement where it takes 364 different positions north and south. And that makes a lot of sense. There are some deep things that I could go into but won't go into now. I recommend checking out some of the other videos on my channel that talk about sign days and how the luminaries render extra service. Anyway, this north-south movement is key, and we have the 4 seasons because of the sun's north-south movement. When the sun is down here, we're going to have winter. When the sun is up here, we're going to have summer, and they're going to have winter. And that sets the year cycle. And so there's no doubt when the sun hits its extreme position up here and down here. You can see that with a sundial. Like, there's no doubt about it. And you can see if you're watching with a sundial, the shadow will be progressing. If you're watching for the summer solstice up here, the sun will be moving up, but the shadow will actually be coming back this way. It'll be getting shorter and shorter. And so the shadows will get shortest on the longest day of the year, and that is the turning point of the season. And then likewise, the sun will get down to this extreme, and it will start to return one day. And these are 2 extremes that divide the year. Like, there's no question about the way that these solstices divide the year into halves, 2 equal seasonal halves. Like I mentioned before, modern science says the seasons are unequal, but I think that is because they're misunderstanding the criteria for an equinox event. And when you look at modern science's data, you will see that it is, I wish I could pull that open, but there's another video I have talking about the seasons where you can look at that data. But the half years are equal according to modern science. Even it's the timing of the equinox events that makes one season longer or shorter than the other. But the half years from solstice to solstice, those are the longest and shortest days of the year. Those are the times when the sun reaches its highest and lowest point. There is no question about those dates, except for a slight variation due to what I call a sign day possibly, but it is equal, consistently equal timing. So what that tells me is, another big thing, depending on where you are in your pursuit of truth, like there are just so many different calendars out there, and we've just got to pray for wisdom to discern what is tradition and what is not tradition. And there's just so much to talk about, and I encourage you to talk with me if you have any questions. But essentially, in a nutshell, I'm going to sit and let you know that the scriptures mostly have been translated incorrectly. When you see the phrase "the new moon" in the new moons, there is this bias, and it just is automatically assumed that months are determined. So we just talked about years, and we talked about seasons. Going one increment less to months it's just assumed that months are governed by the moon because of this phrase that's translated so often in the scriptures as "in the new moons." But this is an improper translation, and it should actually be translated "in the new months." And I won't go into it in extreme depth here. Please let me know if you have any questions, but if you do search the scriptures, and I believe you will find that the scriptures are consistently, you will never ever hear any mention of a 13th month. In the book of Revelation, I'll just give you one example. It said there were 12 fruits on the 12 on the tree of life, for the 12 months of the year. Like, they're only 12, they're not 13, and so that again has to do with this lunar month. There are other stories in the books of the Kings about this as well, but you'll just never find any reference to a 13 month. You'll find references to every other number of months, like you'll see in the first month, in the third month, in the 12th month, but you will never see in the 13th month. And so, all that to say, my current understanding is based off of something I read in Enoch, where he says the months are actually solar based. And again, that has to do with the sun's north and south movement. Enoch describes this movement as the sun traveling through different portals, and each block of time that it spends in a portal is called a solar month, and there are equal seasons in the year and there are equal solar months in the year, exactly 12 solar months. The Gregorian calendar is solar month based. It's very, very close. It's probably the closest, ironically, to being correct. But solar months, according to Enoch, last for 30 days and are followed at the end of each season has 3 solar months, and at the end of each season there is one special sign day, the equinoxes and the solstices, and these are described in Enoch, very specifically in great detail. And so that's what my understanding is based off of. I just read the scriptures, and I heard somebody mentioned that the translation was wrong where it says in the new moon, and I looked into it, and I just started looking into all of it, and it seems moon months are just a Babylonian tradition that comes from Babylonian. When they went into Babylonian captivity, they must have lost the month cycle, and I mean, it goes hand in hand with that scripture verse that says, he will think to change times and laws, and he does this at so many levels. But anyway, there's much to look into, and I just recommend you look into that. If you haven't come across that one yet, we can talk more about that. But so that is what this is based off of. It's based off of solar seasons and solar months. And so what I realized was there's this perfect symmetry in the year. And you will have 3 solar months. So look at the symmetry of these seasonal days in green, how the perfect symmetry in this year. And what I eventually realized was the half years are huge, and the half years are where you can count off all your holy days correctly, and you can do that from the first day of the year and from the first day of the 7th month. That's how the scripture is called in Leviticus, the first day of the 7th month. And, according to the solar calendars, if you are saying you've got a solar calendar, then you've got to realize the seasons are solar and the months are solar, and they happen because the sun is in a very specific location in the heavens. And what I realized is the 1st and the 7th months happen at the end of the season. So the seasons divide the year into 4 parts. There are 3 months per season, so that means 2 seasons have 6 months. So when 2 seasons are over, the next season that begins is the 7th month. So all that to say, the first day of fall should be the first day of the 7th month, and that makes beautiful, simplistic, awesome sense. Because it follows, the sun gives a special sign, like remember Genesis 1:14 said the luminaries were for signs, and the sun and the moon and the stars, I believe they all contribute to these signs, and I'm still learning about that heavily. But the sign declares the end of the season, and then the day following the sign is the first day of the new season. And so all of that's kind of an overview of what this is. And so now, how did I end up with this timing? I mean, the next step is you have to make sure you're observing those signs properly, and that's where my focus has been lately. been trying to understand that for a long time now, and well, maybe 2 or 3 years now, very heavily trying to learn how to observe the movements of heavenly luminaries, and I've tried different methods that I've seen different people do, but I've always had some concern and uncertainty about some of the methods that were being used to determine the equinox events, the days of equal light and darkness. And by the way, that is how Enoch qualifies the division of the seasons. There's a day with equal light and darkness, and I think that day, I just recommend you check out my other videos. There's a video I did where I think it was part 5 of the Fall Equinox video, where I just give a bunch of tips and I talk about this, and I really go into detail about what modern science has done to potentially mess up the timing of the equinox event. But how Enoch qualifies it is equal day and equal night, and I do think there's a possibility that this might happen somewhere. I think maybe at the equator, but we'll see. But anyway, all that to say, I have some concern about the equinox event, but I do feel very confident about the solstice events, because it's so easy. Well, it's not necessarily easy, but it's much more a certain thing to see the sun hit an extreme position and then start to return. And this past summer we had a multitude of witnesses watching the sun to see when it would hit that point of return, and it seems from the majority of witnesses that that happened on the 20th of June, 7 a.m. North America time, and this is when that special day started, and then people around the world were seeing it hit the extreme position, and so I think point A was the first person to see it, and point G was the last person to see it. So it theoretically, this special sign day started somewhere in this zone. But for me, here in North America, it started on 6/20. So then, if I'm reasonably sure that this date right here was 6/20, that means the first day of the season of summer was here, and so I just count 90 days, and then one more day, and this should be the fall equinox in theory. And I'm not exactly sure what the luminaries are going to be doing then. We're looking into it right now currently. But then the day following, which is today, is theoretically, it is today, right? 1920, yeah. is the Day of Trumpets, and you count from there. So that's my current understanding, my friends. Oh, we're working out this salvation with fear and trembling. So many different versions of the calendar out there, but I mean, I have to believe, if we're all seeking the truth in love with pure hearts diligently, I mean, we're just at different places of understanding. We need to try and find ways to fellowship one way or another if we can, but I hope the more we study, the more we will figure out these things. But that's my current understanding. I'm sharing that again based off of the scripture that says proclaim in their season. So that's my current understanding. Please feel free to let me know your thoughts, and shalom, and may Abba bless you as you continually seek out his truth in love with a pure heart.